I'm Dave Cousin, and this is SEO in 2024 Additional Insights.
Dave, what's your additional insight for SEO in 2024?
So my insight and my tips today are going to be focused around how important it's going to be more than ever to integrate SEO or organic search along with paid search, and just how much benefit there is for both channels of sharing information, sharing insights. But with SGE rolling out, Search Generative Experience rolling out, we think probably fairly soon. My personal point of view is that's probably going to be May this year or soon after, is going to be more and more important to think about the whole funnel and where those two different channels sit within that funnel to actually generate conversions and value.
So SGE is your primary reason why you think that SEOs should be learning to work more closely with paid search?
Absolutely. I mean, it's something that these teams should be doing already, but too often it doesn't. This is a great tip for any businesses out there who already have organic search and paid search teams, but maybe they're working in silo. Maybe you've got two separate agencies for the two channels, and you need to be the go-between to make sure they're working together and sharing information. Or maybe you're only doing organic search, you're only doing paid search, and there's so many opportunities to make sure that they both work together. And you might think, as an SEO, I'd say, okay, well, actually, organic search is the one, that's where you should put all of your effort. Paid's a waste of money, but that's not actually the case. There's some things that paid's very good for and some things that organic's very good for, and they work best when they work together at different points in the funnel.
And is the funnel changing now that we are likely to have a SGE? And how does this precisely change the way that SEOs have to work with paid search or should work with paid search?
Absolutely. So the thing that's panicking a lot of people working in SEO and in digital marketing in general is the fact that with Search Generative Experience, we're likely to see more zero-click searches. Now, I believe that you can still optimize Search Generative Experience to show up as a source and to generate clicks, which is a whole other topic. But in those occasions where people are looking for an answer to a specific question, there's still a lot of value to showing up with organic as a source. And that's partly to do with building brand awareness. Now, a lot of people are saying that, Search Generative Experience doesn't make sense for Google because they're going to lose out on a lot of ad revenue. Now, that's one of the arguments that some people think it isn't going to roll out as soon. My personal point of view is that that's not the case at all. Now, Google actually showed us at the Google I/O event when they announced SGE last year, they showed us a version of SGE which had Google shopping ads integrated into it, and where just traditional paid ads were showing still above Search Generative Experience. And the versions we've seen in labs haven't had that, but that doesn't mean that Google aren't working on that. And Google don't have to show Search Generative Experience for every single search, but they can show them for those ones where people aren't bidding on ads anyway because they're in the upper funnel. And that means that that's a good opportunity to get visibility there with organic. And even if we're not getting clicks, we can still get brand awareness. Now, Google want to keep you then in your research phase on Google, because before maybe you'd see a great result at the top and you'd go and click on that, and maybe that would take you to an article on a website which sells the product that you actually end up wanting to buy once you've finished your research and you decided what it is you actually want. Well, now Google are trying to keep you on the search engine's results page for longer by giving you those answers with Search Generative Experience, then allowing you to ask follow-up questions. But eventually you're going to get to that moment of decision, that moment of purchase where you've done your research and you've decided that there is something that you need to buy, or a service you're interested in, or an inquiry you want to make. And at that point, that's where Google are going to be able to make some more money, because they're going to have people who want to advertise at that point. Once you've got that, it's basically a qualified lead because they've been through that research phase. Now, if you have had visibility all the way through as a trustworthy source for Google with your organic result, and then they see your paid result, they're much more likely to click on that result. They're much more likely to see you as a trusted brand, even if they didn't even know who you were before they started their research journey. Because if Google trusts you, then you should be trustworthy, right? And so then the opportunity
absolutely, no, that's a rhetorical question, isn't it? But
yeah,
You touched upon many things there, of course. You started off talking about brand, the importance of becoming an authoritative brand within your industry as well. Are you saying that you have to build that up within the realm of AI software, and that you're not necessarily driving people to your website nowadays?
Yeah, I think that's going to be the reality in the future with search generative experience, with other AI search engines. We see things like Perplexity gaining a lot of followers, and a lot of people starting to use that, people starting to use AI tools that don't just say, well, here's the results that might give you the answer. They give you that answer. So, with featured snippets, we've already been seeing for a long time more zero-click searches. And we obviously try to optimize featured snippets that we think are going to generate traffic because people want to click and want to find out more. And maybe we're creating titles that are a little bit almost clickbaity so that people are like, oh, actually, yeah, this maybe is an article that I want to read more of. And we can do that within search generative experience as well. But sometimes people do just want a quick answer and, do want to kind of just go through a few steps in their research and get as quickly as possible to that point where they are actually making a purchase decision, or where they are ready to start getting in contact with companies they might want to work with.
You teased us with a comment a few moments ago when you said that you believe that you will be able to actually receive traffic and measure traffic from SGE, but you also said that that was for another discussion. But maybe can you give us a flavor of what you mean by that?
Yeah, so at the moment, we're limited on visibility of traffic from any of kind of AI tools. OpenAI and Microsoft Copilot have recently enabled it so you can actually track referral traffic in your analytics. SGE at the moment is only in labs, and we hope that Google will, when they roll that out, give us full access to, where is SGE showing, where are we showing as a source for that, and are we getting and traffic from that? But that remains to be seen exactly what Google's actually going to give us in that case. But in terms of how we actually optimize that, that is, optimizing for being a source. And there are various ways that we can optimize to be a source for SGE. But then once we're a source, it's then making sure that the little kind of snippet of, this is one of the sources that's been taken in that carousel, which is the current version, is something that people are going to want to click on to find out more. And I think particularly if people are researching the kind of topics that are things they're passionate about, rather than something that's a bit boring and they just want to kind of get an answer as quickly as possible. But if it's the kind of topics, that are their hobbies and things they're passionate about, and you can put, something like, top 10 tips for this thing, then maybe that's the kind of thing that is going to be able to generate clicks. So you can still get organic traffic in that way.
And going even further away from the intended core topic, how do you optimize your site to be an authoritative source for SGE?
Sure. So I think the best ways to do that are really to follow the kind of basic principles of EEAT. So, thinking about being a trustworthy site from what we're seeing within the labs version of SGE, what's showing up at the moment, we can see that a lot of the time sources are those who have original data and original information that's not available elsewhere. Those do seem to be quite good at picking the original source for information. So if you can create kind of primary research, that kind of thing, and that's into your content, then that's something that Google are going to really like. But also, sites are good at themselves, including sources of where they got information from and showing themselves as being trustworthy in that way. As well, of course, the old kind of ranking factors of links from authoritative websites is still a big thing. And, in some ways, it's also similar to what we do for feature snippets. So making sure we're signposting pieces of content and pages to which parts of the page answer which questions, making it, very clear. Okay, well, this passage is about this topic and clear answer. People don't want to be, getting their information from pages which are written in a very wishy-washy way and are a bit non-committal. They want, to take and then regurgitate to people within search generative experience.
Great advice. So how can paid search make the SEO's life easier?
So there's a lot of basic things that organic and paid teams should be working on together, which they're just not. And if we have time, maybe we should talk a little bit about KPIs and how important setting the right KPIs is for that. But in terms of just some of the things that you should start thinking about, just think about how much data paid have. And as SEOs, we like to complain about paid and say how easy their jobs are because they've got all this perfect data, which tells them exactly which keywords are generating, which sales, which ads are generating clicks and conversions. But if their lives are easier, then let's make our lives easier by taking some of that data. It's so much easier to test landing pages and which landing pages are converting in paid, and even doing things like A/B testing and MVT testing, endless different versions of a landing page to find the one that works. And generally the one that works for paid is also going to be the one that works for organic, at least in terms of conversions. Although at the same time, if we can see that the page that Google is picking as the one to show for a search term at the top is different to the one that the paid team are using, we can also give that information back to them and say, well, Google seems to think this is relevant, because Google are fantastic at understanding the intent behind search terms and showing the most relevant page. And maybe paid assume that the intent behind a keyword is one thing, and so they've shown one landing page, but actually it's something different, and a different type of page which answers a different intent is the one that should be showing. So it is a two-way kind of opportunity to share information.
So what are the key KPIs that are relevant for both SEOs and paid search teams?
So what happens a lot of the time is that the KPIs that are set are different. Maybe they're similar, but they're okay. Well, which conversions are coming from paid search and which conversions are coming from organic search? And you're given your KPIs of generate as many conversions as possible. Paid are trying to keep their return on investment as low as possible for paid, and that incentivizes them to then go after stuff that maybe organic search is already doing quite well for. But if they can come in and put a paid ad on top where it's low competition, get a low cost per click for something they know is going to convert very well, then a lot of the time that's what happens in teams. And that's kind of teams not working together and deciding, well, who owns which keywords, who's going to go after which keywords. Whereas if you have combined KPIs, at least as part of your KPIs of, okay, what is search generating in terms of conversions, in terms of revenue and return on investment. And a lot of the time people act as if, organic is kind of free, but actually you're putting a lot of time and effort into that. And there's times where you maybe are thinking about creating a piece of content and you found a keyword which, you think is going to be very highly relevant. But if it's only got, 20, 30 searches a month, the cost per click for that, for paid to go after that is going to be relatively low. Well, maybe it doesn't make sense to create a piece of content that's going to take, a copywriter, a day to write. It's going to take a long time to get a return on investment for that. Whereas paid can optimize and get visibility for that straight away. So by having these combined KPIs, particularly return on investment, which should consider the advertising costs for paid, but also the time cost for organic, then I think you make much better decisions over what channel goes after what keywords and how to maximize your visibility.
So what can paid search learn from SEOs?
Paid search, can also learn a lot from as SEOs in terms of how we go about optimizing pages. I think as SEOs, we're very good at understanding intent, making sure that we're creating pages that meet the intent of the user, because we know otherwise Google nowadays just won't show us, we can't just kind of stuff keywords in to a page and hope it's going to rank. We actually need to make sure it's a good page for users. And that's something that in paid, to get the best results, that's what you need to do. But a lot of the time, that's not what they're doing. They're just throwing traffic at a page. Now, of course, I'm generalizing. There are some great paid people out there who do understand these things as well. But I think, there's a lot to learn just by looking at how we work in organic and the things we're focusing on for paid teams. And there's a lot we can learn from paid teams too.
So you've shared what SEO should be doing in 2024. Now let's talk about what SEO shouldn't be doing. So what's something that's seductive in terms of time, but ultimately counterproductive? What's something that SEO shouldn't be doing in 2024?
Yeah. So I think, that point around creating content for the sake of it is something that's a big mistake that a lot of SEOs make, particularly where it can be owned by paid. A lot of the time we'll go after keywords just because they've got high search volume without thinking about whether they're actually going to be valuable for us, the people that are searching for those. We understand that actually, people searching for a term that's maybe related to our industry, but is not related to a user journey that's going to end up buying something. We can understand that that's probably not valuable for organic or for paid. So that's where a lot of time and a lot of effort goes, or going after those keywords that maybe have a very high intent, but such low search volume that, it's not a good investment of our time to be creating pieces of content, using our best copywriters when there's probably better opportunities out there for them to be working on.
So when it comes to search volume, you mentioned certain keywords may not have enough search volume to focus on. So how do you know when it's too little and it becomes too insignificant and you shouldn't be focusing on it?
So it's worth thinking about, firstly, okay, well, if we just ran some paid advertising for that, what is the cost per click? So say there's 20 people searching a month, and maybe you can expect a rate on an ad of, let's say, 25%. So that's going to cost you, if it's 50 cents per click, it's going to cost you only $1 or $2. Whereas, it's going to cost you, in terms of the amount of time it's going to take someone to write a piece of content to rank for that, maybe it's going to take a day. And if you kind of think about the day rate of your copywriters, then it's going to take you maybe 50 years to get a return on investment for that. And so that's what you need to kind of think about, how long is it going to take to get the return on investment based on the number of people. Whereas if there's something which doesn't need a longer piece of content, it just needs like a quick piece of content with a definition, it's going to take you less time. And if it would cost a lot to bid on for paid, that's also an indication it's probably got a high conversion rate if it's going to cost a lot. And that, it's likely to convert well, then maybe that's something you go after, even if it has a lower search volume. So it varies a little bit. And I'd say, using a tool like SimilarWeb is very useful if you don't understand for a keyword you might want to go after, like, is it actually valuable? Because then you can actually see for your competitors who maybe already are ranking for that keyword, is it actually valuable for them? So I think too often we go after keywords just because our competitors have created content for something and they've got visibility. So we assume, that must be a good idea. But sometimes our competitors make mistakes as well, and we can learn from their mistakes using those sort of tools.
Another great reason for paid search and SEO to work more closely together. Dave Cousin is Head of Organic at Oban International. You can find him over at obaninternational.com. Dave, thanks so much for adding your additional insight to SEO in 2024.
Thank you.
I've been your host, David Bain. You've been listening to an episode of SEO in 2024 Additional Insights, a Majestic series that complements the original SEO in 2024 podcast, video series, and book. Find out more at SEOin2024.com.